Hello everyone, welcome back to Insights at DDLynn Designs. This is DDLynn and I'm really excited to share with you this fun little ring concept I came up with this morning, and it's adjustable. I did this as a prototype just to play with the wire. I did totally 20 gauge, which we'll be using today, 2 18 gauge wires and one 20 gauge wire. So before we get started, I really appreciate all your support, everybody. I'm scooting my chair in. So I would really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell so you know when my next tutorials are coming out, and any comments or likes, really appreciate that. So welcome again to Insights at DDLynn Designs, a unique twist in the ancient art of wire. So let's get started. So what we're going to start with today is I've got these are 4mm Amazonite gem beads. And you can use smaller. I wouldn't go a whole lot larger unless they're flat back. So if you can find drilled through flat back gems, that'd be great. So the second thing you want to make sure of, and this is the reason why I'm using a 20 gauge, is that your wire can fit through your bead. So if you have a drill that has the right bit on it, you can always enlarge your bead holes. But I probably maybe sort of could get 18, but it was a little tight, so I didn't want to force it. So we're starting off with 2 4mm beads and 3 wires. I have cut 2 18 gauge wires and 1 20 gauge wire, 4 inches each. For me, am going to be making a size 8 adjustable ring. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. If you want a smaller ring, then I would recommend that you don't weave as much. I did just a little shy of 3/4 of an inch of a weave. So before I get started, I just want to put this out there, a little shout out to all the newbies and the beginners, but mostly this message is for advanced students. I'm very, very patient and detail oriented for all the newbies and beginners, because I know how important that is to have every little detail as possible, because our brains and our hands are going in opposite directions. So that being said, you might want to fast forward, turn the volume off, pick up your speed. But anyways, thank you so much everyone for being a part of this magical ancient art of wire. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is determine where your center is based on your beads, because I'm going to be wrapping my beads like I did here. So I'm going to be wrapping them. So there's going to be just a little bit of space in between them. So you want to start your weaving, and let me get my ruler. We're going to find our center of this 4 inches. I want to make sure I have my 20 gauge out. I'm thinking out loud, everybody. So here's my 2-inch mark, and I highly recommend that if you're a beginner or not, a lot of very professional, advanced technical artists measure all the time. It makes a world of difference. So I want to weave about, I want to start, because I want to do about 3/4 of an inch to my center. So I need to set up my beads so that I know, and this is just one way of doing it. So there's my center. Hopefully you guys can see that. And so I want 3/4 without my beads moving. I want a little less than 3/4 of an inch. So all I'm going to do is just to give myself a visual. I'm just going to mark, and I'm going to come in a little bit closer. This is just telling me where my beads are going to sit approximately, okay? And then I'm going to measure from this point to a little less than 3/4 of an inch. So I'm moving this point right here. So here's 3/4. If this is 5 to 6, this would be 3/4 right here. So I want to start my weaving here, and I want to end it here. And the same thing over here, and I'll remeasure that again. So I want this to be about the same length. You can always add more wire if you need to. So I'm going to get my beads out of the way. And I'm going to really try to stay in frame because I can never see what the heck I'm doing. And I'm going to be using, you can use 28. So I'm going to be using 28 today, and I'm going to be working off the spool. So I'm going to grab my middle wire and I'm going to line it up because I'm going to start my weaving on this line, and I'm going to stop here because this is my center point where my two beads are going to go, where I'm going to wrap them together. So I'm going to bring in my other wire. I'm just going to line these up. You want your wires nice and straight. And by the way, you guys, I hardened my wires even more, and I really hardened my 20 gauge because I want this to be a nice strong ring. Oh, words, too many words. Okay, so I'm going to start with 2 wraps, and I'm going to leave myself, just to be on the safe side, a 4-inch tail. So here's my little tail over here. So I'm going to do 2 wraps, and it's a really cool weave. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a checkerboard. It's a 2-2 when you're starting, but then you're anchoring off the top wire and the bottom wire before you begin your 2-2 again. So I'm going to do 2 wraps on my mark if I didn't wash it off already. So that's 2. Then I'm going to go over 2. Bring my wires a little bit more parallel aligned. So I'm going to go over 2. In between 2, I'm going to go over 2, the top 2 wires, and when I come around the back this time, I'm going to be coming in between wire 2 and 3. I'm going to come all the way around the back, and I'm going to wrap over the base wire, wire 1 full rotation. This will be your first repeat, and I'm going to snug them together. So I'm going to do the same thing over wires 1 and 2 twice, in between wires 1 and 2, over wires 2 and 3 twice. But when I come around my second rotation with wires 2 and 3, I'm going to come back in between wires 2 and 3 and wrap all the way around wire 3, come all the way around the back, and wrap over wire 1, a complete rotation, which brings that wire from underneath all the way back up. So this is your second repeat. I'm going to do this one more time, and then I'm going to weave a little less than 3/4 of an inch, maybe exactly 3/4. You just got to play with it. So let me do this one more time so that you really have it down. So I'm going to go over wires 1 and 2 twice. I'm going to come in between wires 1 and 2, over wires 2 and 3 twice, but when I come back around the back, so here's the back, I'm going to bring my wire back through wires 2 and 3 and all the way around wire 3 underneath all 3 wires and over wire 1, a complete rotation. So that's now 3 repeats. And if your ink wears off, you might want to remeasure. Also, watch your wires, don't slide up. Keep them parallel with each other. And I can see some of mine because there's my center. So I'll just have to measure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave up 3/4 of an inch, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've done about 3/4 of an inch, maybe just a little shy of that. I can always add wire, but I just wanted to show you what I'm going to do now before we start wrapping in the stone. So I finished my last rotation. And if you noticed, I taped my wire. So here's a really good tip for beginners. Your round wire will slide a lot when you're weaving it, especially when you're using a very fine gauge weaving wire. So after you've started your first set of repetitions, you may want to tape the back just to keep them uniformed and aligned and from trying to cross over. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to coil off to finish this weave 3 times. So here's the third. And if you're new to my channel, I call this snapping the wire. As long as you have a wire coming in between another wire, so always in between 2 wires, you can simply wiggle, jiggle, wiggle, jiggle, and you just keep doing that and your wire will snap clean off. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that back down. And I'm just going to leave my tape on for now. I don't have to, but I'm going to. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and oh, by the way, you guys, I wanted to show you how beautiful this weave is, but it's uniquely gorgeous on the other side and totally different. Check this out. I have done this weaving pattern and turned it over and just really wanted this side to be my focus, my focal point on a weaved object. If you do it right, you will have, if you can see there, like a diagonal, and it's just beautiful. So I just need to pause for a minute, gang. I'll be right back. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to wrap the beads. So basically what we're going to be doing is separating our wires just to kind of give you a visual and wrapping them over, under, over. So because the beads are drilled through, we don't have to worry obviously about them popping out. But isn't that cute? And it's adjustable. And I tried to make it really decorative on the back, and you could do whatever you want, gang. It's really your call. But this is just something I was playing around with this morning, and I had this idea in my head, and that's how it came out. So I thought it was just really cute and really wanted to share it with y'all. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to separate our 2 outside 18 gauge wires. So I'm going to pull this one out. And if it's easier for you because you're not left-handed and you're more right dominant and everything, always turn your wire over in an easier working position for you and use the hand that you're most comfortable with. So this is kind of what you should have. This is my back. As you can see, that's the weave, or this could be my front because of that beautiful diagonal. It's really very detailed how the wires, I just love this, almost look like they're tucking and then hiding, and then it's just wild. Love it. But anyways, whatever side you want, your call. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to put your bead on your 20 gauge middle wire. So I'm going to spread these out even more. So I'm going to pull that way down, and I'm going to pull that way down because I'm going to use that to allow me to, I guess, think of it this way. This is like your anchor. So you want to hold firmly, but you also want to be close to your bead. And what you're going to do is and you can hold your bead if you want, which is what I'm going to do. You're going to swing this wire. And the reason why you have these tapes now is because that wire could pull out. So let me backstep a little bit. Make sure you tape your ends really securely before you start wrapping your bead, or you'll slide that wire likely out. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to swing this around all the way over. And here's what you should have. Now, because it's 18 gauge wire, it might be a little harder for you if you're new to wrapping. I wouldn't say this is a beginner ring, but I'm always telling people to go for it. You wouldn't believe the stuff I went for. Wasn't always very successful. So I really wanted this wire to go over that one. So sorry, gang. So here's what we got, okay? So you want to swing that over. Then I'm just going to make sure it's nice and tight. Notice how nicely it's wrapping around that bead. Okay? So now this one, since this one's over, you want to make sure that your opposite wire goes under. And I'm holding that bead really tight. I can't show you until I get around it, okay? And I'm swinging it under. I don't know why I move my hands to the right so much. So I'm swinging it under. So here's what you should have now. And this is a bracelet concept that I do, but I do it with 5 wires. And some of you may have seen it. I'll show you. Give me one sec. I'm going to get out of my chair. I just wanted to stop and show you why I came up with this for a ring idea. But this is a sterling silver, these absolutely beautiful, these are kyanite. So it is the same concept, but it's done with 5 wires. And you really need to know your measurements and your lengths. When I've done a complete, this is a cuff. So if you can see, it's a half cuff with a chain clasp. I think it's just a beautiful piece. And then I added in this kyanite bead, and then did this custom clasp that I do. But by having it as a half cuff, you don't use as much sterling. But when I'm making a full cuff of this, you're talking about almost 160 inches of weaving wire. It's crazy. It's very monotonous because it's the same thing over and over again when you're weaving, and I'm weaving at about 9 to 10 inches of length at roughly, I'm going to say, based on my weaving design, 60 to 70 repeats just on 2 wires on one side. But so as you can see, just wanted to stop there and give you an idea how you can really take off on this. I just saw something one day when I was out, and I loved looking at whatever, I don't remember what I was looking at, but I don't remember if it was jewelry. Something I was looking at made me go home and start coming up with this idea of how I could interlock these beads. And so anyways, that's what I did. So let's continue. So if that inspires you, great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to add our next bead. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing. But here's what's really important. This one is over, right? It's on the top. Okay, do you see that? This wire is riding on top of this stone. If this is the back, it's riding on top of this stone. But if we look at the front, this is over and this is under. So this time, our wire that's over is going to wrap around the next bead, but it's going to go under it. So again, I'm going to hold my bead really tight, and I'm going to swing this wire under the middle wire all the way over. Make sure it's nice and tight. So here's what you should have. Okay, so now this one, logically, because it's under, it's going to go over and around the other side. So I'm going to hold my bead, and I'm going to grab my wire, and I'm going to swing that around until it crosses over the other side. And this is what you should have. Now, it's natural to have this little gap here, and there's nothing absolutely wrong with that, because when you bend your ring down, it's going to kind of disappear sort of anyways. So now what we're going to do is we're going to straighten these wires. Now remember, you're working with 18 gauge. If you did this with 20, it will be a lot easier, but your ring won't hold up as well. This was done, as I mentioned, with 20 gauge wire. It's okay, but as I mentioned in my other tutorials, if you've been following me, once you go to market, you really want your designs to hold up. And when it comes to rings and bracelets that get banged around a lot, I would suspect after someone wearing this for some time, it's going to bend relatively easy because it just doesn't have enough strength to the wire. So, you know, you might want to take that into consideration. It's just my suggestion, but it's really to the benefit of the client to make sure that whatever you're making for resale, that it holds up. So, okay, so enough of that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna straighten our wires, and you can come in with pliers. I'm first just going to, now that I've got my shape, I'm just gonna help myself a little bit by pulling this wire out. So I give myself a little gap space to work with. And I'm gonna do the same thing with this wire. I'm gonna start pulling it out. And now I'm gonna go ahead and straighten them out because I want the same shape or design, if you will. And I'm gonna use my round nose, and I want a really petite tip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in with my round nose close to the bead, but towards the middle of my wire, my middle wire. And you're just gonna have to gauge this. And I'm just gonna slowly start to see how I'm making that same curve on it. I'm just gonna slowly start because 18 gauge is a much harder wire. So I'm slowly starting to bring that wire out. And we'll make some adjustments if we need to. So I'm going to turn it over because, as I'm always mentioning, get yourself in the best working position you possibly can. So don't try to work aside if it's uncomfortable for you. I didn't really take that into consideration when I was first starting. So it's a really helpful tip. Turn your work around so you're working with your dominant hand, which will make it much easier for you to find symmetry in your pieces, to create symmetry in your pieces. So I'm slowly rolling that. Because I really don't want to screw up my wire, right? So now I'm going to turn this back around. And I'm going to tighten this up just to kind of make sure everything's lining up. And this is where you're going to be doing your tweaking. Just kind of pushing that in. And you can squeeze them if you want. I know that seems so obtrusive, but it's really not. You'd be blown away what I do to wires sometimes. I just get in there and just give it a good gorilla grip. Okay, so that's better. Now we're going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to weave approximately 3/4 of an inch. I want to make sure my wires are nice and snug and close together. You want to keep this tape back here. This middle wire could slide out. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get my 28 gauge and I'm going to work off the spool. And I'm going to make 2 coils around the bottom. And they're going to be 2 full. So it's going to appear like 3. Now here's where you might get caught up a little bit. Your wire's going to want to hang out down here in the curve of this wire. So you want to kind of keep it up. So make your first coils around your base wire further up before you slide them down. So there's 2. And then I'm going to snug them up really good and tight to keep them from wanting, they're naturally going to want to slide down into this little arc there where the wire's bent. So now I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to go over 2 twice. Get my wires separated a little bit here. Let me get where's my needle nose? Just making some adjustments. You got to watch because it's going to want to slide down in there. Okay, so over 2. So you see what I mean? How it wants to slide down in that. It's okay if these coils down here are there. You just don't want it sliding down inside the piece. Then back in between the 2, over the top 2 twice. Then come back in between the top 2, all the way around the back and over your base wire once. That's going to be my first set of repeats. And I don't want these going off on an angle. I'm going to do something here, and you might want to do this too. I just want to make sure that wire is sitting in there nice, because you got to remember we're going to be wrapping this around a ring mandrel. Okay, I'm going to do this a couple more times, and then I'm going to do that up to 3/4 of an inch, and then I'll be back. So I'm going to go over 2, twice. These wires are hugging in just a little too close for my taste, which is why I'm having to get my nail in there. Over the top, 2 twice. In between the top 2, all the way around the back, and over the base wire once. So that's 2 repeats. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to go over wires 1 and 2 twice. In between wires 1 and 2, over wires 2 and 3 twice. In between wires 2 and 3, all the way around the back, and over wire 1. Okay, you guys, I'll be right back. Okay, so I've weaved both sides, and I wanted to know, and I'm really glad, I love when things happen where I recognize, oh, my wire slid. And I talked about this when we first started weaving. When I first started weaving this side, I was noticing before I taped that my wires were shifting, and so they're longer on this side than this side. But that's okay, because we're working with excess wire. Nobody has a 4-inch finger. Well, maybe somebody does on the planet, but I've never met them or heard of them. Haha. So anyways, just word to the wise that as soon as you start your first couple of repetitions, you might want to measure your wire and make sure your stones are centering up, that you have the equal amount of wire on each side, or you could always put your stones in your middle wire and mark your wires on the outside that way, however you want to do it. But just some suggestions. So I'm going to even my wires up. I want to see how long my shortest one is. And I've left myself a tail, which I'm going to coil off twice. So I have 2 coils on each side. You always want to make sure when you coil off or finish a coil that it's coming in between 2 wires, and it's not like, it doesn't matter, I'm going to confuse you there. So I'll let that thought go. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my tape off. And I want my middle wire longer anyways, so I'm going to measure this side so that they're even on both sides since my wires are shorter over here. But the first thing I'm going to do is just clean up that tip, square it up, and then I'm going to measure it on my board. And that is just a hair shy of 3/4 of an inch. And I know that this one's longer than that. I would say this is over an inch. So I'm going to cut this down, and it's exactly at 1 inch. So I'm going to cut this down just shy of 3/4 of an inch so that the same on each side, because I'm going to need that middle wire to create my swirl. So then I'm going to measure these, and I want to clean that up a little bit. Just want to straighten that up a little bit. So I'm going to measure this one, and it's just over a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut this side the same length. And now I know over here, these need to be, over here, just these, my outside 18 gauge wires need to be just a smidge over a 1/2 inch. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm probably not going to need these wires, but I always like to have a little tail wire, is I'm going to separate these out, and I'm going to pull them away from the middle wire. Okay? So I have something like that. Is that too close? Is it getting blurry? Now you could, by the way, coil up on these. So if you've got a decent amount of wire and you want to give it a really cool design, coil up on the sides if you want. And instead of having bare wire coming over, you would have coiled wire coming over. Maybe we'll do that. You know what? I think we'll do that. So let me pull this side out. And I'm going to put this in the most advantageous working position for myself. So here's what we have. A little stick person, sorta. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this excess wire, and I got a kink in it. And if you ever get a kink and you're new to this, always go in the opposite direction of the kink so that you unwrap it or unravel it to where it's not having resistance against itself. So I'm going to coil up. I've already got 3. So let me see how many I can get. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm going to slide those down. Now, I need this excess wire here to, once I'm done with my design, to tuck in. So I'm going to, obviously this is going to be a little bit different than this one because these wires ended up being too short. So I had to shorten the length on these. So, I don't know how that got turned around my middle wire. Doesn't really matter. I don't know why I'm futzing with that. 14, 15. Just need to make sure I have a good 1/4 of an inch in bare wire. So I'm going to stop at 15, okay? And I'm just going to snipper and tucker. Okay, now I'm going to get got some scrap wire here. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to wrap 15 times. Let me see if those look even. And I just need to go, I think, 1 more. Probably didn't count off right. What else is new, right? And looks like I need 1 more coil. Must have done 17 and lost count. That's good. So now, looking for my needle nose, and I don't know where they went. I'm sure they're around here somewhere. If you can see this, I'll turn my camera. Here's all my tools in front of me. Think I got enough? But you know how it is. You have your favorites. So anyways, I just thought I'd share that with you for a little fun for a minute. Okay, so I'm trying, here we go, my needle nose. Alrighty then. So I just want to cinch that down. And this little guy, and he's a wee bit. So we're just changing it up. You know, the sky's the limit. Whatever your vision is, it's your vision. You make it any way you think. There's so many different ways to close off a ring. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over here. All right. Looks about the same to me. And one more, and then we'll start with our decorations. Make sure I don't feel any pokey. I do. Ah, gone now. Isn't that pretty? I just had to stop and pause for a minute. That's the back side of that weave. That's just so pretty. I love that. Okie dokie. We're almost done. Okay, so now, knowing that I don't have an inch of wire, I'm just going to have less to work with. So all you're going to do is you're just going to start shaping these wires down. We're going to bring our pliers in here in a minute. So I'm just doing it where the weave is starting or ending. So I'm just shaping them down. Not going to do anything with that middle wire yet. Now, I'm going to swing, and I'm not sure if I'm going to swing these over the front like I did here, only because I don't have an inch of wire and I need to wrap around. So let me think about this for a minute. If I bring it over the front, I should have enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see if I can show you, make sense of it for you. I'm going to swing this wire over the front. This is what I mean. This wire is supposed to go around the back. It needed to be at least an inch long, but I had to cut off length. So I'm going to make that even smaller. So what I won't be doing, and as I mentioned in my other tutorials, is you work with what you have. If you notice here, my hoops were bigger, okay? And then I brought them around the shank of the ring and tucked them in. This one, I'm gonna make my hoops a lot smaller, but that's okay. It's still cute. And then I'm gonna tuck it in. And for beginners, you wanna start your bend first. And what I mean is instead of just taking your wire and that little, if it's short like mine, and trying to just bend it over, come back and bend that wire down first. Give yourself a head start so that you can tuck it in. Do you see that? So now what I'm going to do is, I love these little stub nose. They're by Xuron, and they're a stub-nosed, flat-nosed plier. They're really great when you're working with little tiny pieces of wire left, where you don't have a lot of wire to work with. Because they're so short, they're not a long nose plier at all. They're such a short nose plier that it gives you unbelievable control. So, and this is what I mean. I'm just going to grab that and then I am going to push it over and tuck it in. And these are absolutely perfect for what I need to do here. And you will notice with the long nose plier, you won't have the same leverage. It's very obvious when you're working with different pliers what each of their attributes are. So I haven't used these a lot, but when I need them, I love them. So here's the other thing. I was able to really smash, meaning really cinch that wire into the back of this without feeling any Sharpies because of these. I don't have that same effect or ability when I'm using these or chain nose. They've got a very narrow flat tip and they come into each other. I don't know how to explain it because I'm not a tool specialist. Other than that, I noticed immediately what their attributes were and how I would use them in my work. So here's what we have, okay? So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to swing this around really close. Always get yourself in a good working position. And I'm going to bring it like that over the other one. See how cute that is? It's like a little crown. So it's just different. That's what I mean. You can change it up so much. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set myself up. I am bending that wire in as much as possible while I'm holding it very firmly. Then I'm getting my little stubby noses here and I'm anchoring off. Oh, and by the way, you guys, this is why I left open wire, meaning I didn't weave all the way through, because you're going to need to clamp down. And if this was weaved all the way through and you were cinching down on your wire, you're going to ruin your weave. So you want to take those things into consideration based on what you're making. So anyways, just another little tip there. I'm always trying to think of tips and tricks to help accelerate all of your journeys as well as mine in this ancient, fabulous art of wire. So there's your back, and there's no Sharpies, nothing sticking up. We're going to do the same thing over here, okay? So we're just going to bring this wire in, and I'm going to swing it around really close to the body of the shank of the ring, because I need that wire. I need that. This was just enough wire to get it over the shank of the ring and wrap it around the other side. So as before, I'm going to bend that wire and give myself an advantage by setting myself up to get that over that shank as much as possible. Then I'm going to let my little stub nose, and I'm anchoring off this wire with these pliers to push her in. I'm holding very firmly on the shank of my ring, and I'm pushing down, because you got to remember, that's a really short wire. So I'm pushing down on the nose, on the tip of that wire. I'm kind of rolling it in because there's just so little wire there. I'm not going to be cutting any off. And same thing over here. I'm going to swing this around. Really need to get that wire over there. There we go. I think these wires over here were a little bit shorter because I'm feeling it. I am definitely feeling it. Okay. Now I can definitely feel that this wire is shorter. I'm going to pull as much as I can without compromising my ring band. I may not be able to tuck this over all the way. I could have probably moved that one up a little bit more, but you know what? Like I always say, you work with what you have. So I'm going to give this a little stretchy. Really see if I can get up underneath that. Well, that's how she's going to be for now. That's about as far as she's going to go. What I would do at this point is I would get a file and file that corner really smooth. So it's good. It's good that these things happen, but you know where we're going. Mistakes are good. And I don't even know if they're mistakes. It's just a part of this journey, you know? Okay, so now we're going to make a little swirl. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring your wire over on an angle, like that. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. You want it really angled over. And the reason is when we're making a spiral, we need to have the distance away from where we're going to roll in. So if I move my wire to the right, it means that I'm going to be rolling into my left. So you want to make sure that that wire is as far away as possible. So as you're rolling and creating your spiral, you're coming closer and closer to center. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. So I'm going to get my petite nose, round nose, and remember it's going off on the right. So I'm going to make a little tiny, tiny loop. And because these are so much shorter wires, they should have all been an inch long. So you might want to write that down, everybody. You want your excess length to be an inch. So I had just over a half an inch and under 3/4. So I'm just making myself a little tiny itty bitty hook there. You can always cut away, you just can't put back on, right? I want to get my chain nose because those will dig in. So I'm just gonna, this is 20 gauge, so it's gonna squish really easy. So if you haven't made a swirl before, you want to hold the outside when you're making a spiral. You want to hold the outside on the arc, okay? Right here, you want to hold that and turn in. And it's both wrist pushing in at the same time and just following that wire. Do you see what I mean now? I'm going to stop for a minute. Why we were so far out as an angle. Look how quickly we're coming in. So you really want to make sure that's far angled off so that you can just roll this spiral right in to center. See how beautifully that lined up? Gorgeous. So now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Get my petite tip round nose, make myself a little curl. I love these pliers for making swirls and curls and spirals. They've got a really fine tip on them. Just squishing that in. I'm just bringing in that curl on the tip of the wire in. Just pushing her into herself a little bit. And then as before, both wrists, see how my hands are turning into each other as I'm coming off the outside of that swirl so that it should center up beautifully. And it did. So there we have it. So now all we're going to do now is wrap this around. And since my wires were short, I'm already thinking I might be a size 7.5, but it's adjustable. So all you're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it right above 8. So you're just going to go on your ring mandrel and push both sides down. And then you're just going to bring them around. Yeah, I knew it was going to be a little bit smaller than the other one. Now, at this point, I don't have my mallet with me. I would take a mallet, a rubber mallet, or a rawhide mallet. Isn't that cute? Just so cute. And I would, let me find something heavy that I could show, because I don't want to do anything hard. Let me run and get my mallet. Be right back. Okay, everybody, grab my mallet. So now this is where you want to kind of even harden your ring even more. So hold on, let me see how this is. And this is not going to look perfectly round. You're going to have the illusion that it's kind of caving in, but it's really not. And what a difference, the 18 gauge versus the 20. So this I can really move around a lot more. But anyways, It's just an illusion because your finger isn't perfectly round. And that actually is still working out. So isn't that pretty? Just so pretty. You could double them up. So I hope you like this, everyone. I'd really like your feedback. You know, I'm trying to work up the ladder with YouTube so I can get monetized. But anyways, I'm not going to be able to keep doing these free tutorials. But if eventually I can get some kind of compensation from YouTube for running all their commercials on my videos, they're making a fortune off of my my tutorials. YouTube makes a fortune off of every single tutorial because their advertisers, and I just found all this out, I really didn't know how it worked, pay to be on pages that have a lot of followers. Now, I don't know where I'm at right now today. I think 1,400, but imagine Lan Han, if you know who she is. She's fabulous. I believe she's from Vietnam. And I think she has over 200,000 followers. So imagine the money YouTube is making off of her. So you can bet that she's getting monetized every month from YouTube. So anyways, we all can't keep doing everything for free or we go out of business, right? Okay, so here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently, with this rubber mallet, start, and I'm holding this in the ring position that I want. And I'm just hardening everything up. And the reason why we're using rubber is because we don't want to mess up our weave, right? So I'm just tapping away. Want to stay at my 8. Same thing on the ring band. And this is going to harden up your ring band really good. Now I'm pushing those stones. If you don't know how to hold your ring on a mandrel, I'm pushing those stones with my thumb. You see how they're denting into my thumb against this mandrel because this is open, so it's going to want to stretch. And we want to avoid that. So I'm pushing that against it and just tapping lightly back and forth. And I'm really hardening that up. Then I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing on this side. Push those up against that ring mandrel. I don't want it stretching out. But I want a nice, strong, reliable ring. So let me take a look at that. Oh yeah, it's super strong now. It's amazing how quickly that hardens your wire. Isn't that the cutest thing? I actually like it better than my prototype this morning. A lot better. I like everything smaller here. And I love the thicker gauge wire only because I know it's going to hold up. But isn't that the dangest cute thing? This one I could probably turn into a thumb ring. I love thumb, index rings, middle finger rings. I just gravitate towards that. And I've also make rings where they sit right here, little cuff. I call them knuckle cuffs, knuckle cuff rings. So I hope you really enjoyed that, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this magical, most fabulous community in the ancient art of wire. I wish for all of you all that you wish for yourselves. And as Thumper said in Bambi, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. Bye for now.